Hey guys, how are you? Happy Friday. Nick the Record Lover here. It's February 24th, 2023. I hope everybody's doing okay tonight. Well, I'm going to be celebrating this LP, Creedence Clearwater Revival's Mardi Gras, released in April 11th, 1972 on Fantasy Records. And at this point, it was down to a trio, John Fogerty, Doug Clifford, and Stu Cook. And this was their swan song on the Fantasy Records label. And here's a copy that's on the blue label in full radial stereo. Now this could be possibly a reissue on the blue label because I've seen many copies and I own many copies of it on the brown fantasy label. That may have been the first press, but it is listed in many record books, many record collecting books, as having the blue label before the brown label. This, I believe, is a reissue, but on the back of the cover, it doesn't have a barcode. So it could be an early. Hello, Miko. How you doing? How's everything? Good to see you. Glad you made it on here. Miko is one of my special music friends. We talk so much about music. We talk so much about different albums, and it's really great to see you here. I'm glad this is working, and I'm actually getting replies tonight because I tried going live so many times, and I posted on Twitter that I'm going to be here, and on Facebook I'm here, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad that it's. I'm so glad that you guys can join me. Now this album in my description says it does not get enough love, and I'm here to see that it gets the love that it deserves because it deserves a heck of a lot more love than it did in 1972 and in the years since then. So I just like to say that I've read many different reviews of this, and the All Music Guide online gives it only 1.5 stars out of 5. Now that I think is wrong, completely wrong. Robert Christgau, in his book, from albums from the 50s to the 80s, gave it a solid B, and Grail Marcus of Cream magazine in June of 1972, 2 months after this album was released, gave it an A-. He said, now this was a little bit better, he said, than the previous LP that was released when there was still 4 members, when Tom Fogerty was still with the band. Pendulum was the one that was released before this, and it was released in November of 1970 with all 4 original members. And then Tom Fogerty left shortly thereafter for a solo career. So this was recorded in the spring of 1971 and in January of 1972. Now, for the songs, Looking for a Reason is just close. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of this album. First of all, there are two different stories about this album. One story is Fogerty wanted to share the load of songs, that everybody was going to put in 1/3 of the songs on this album because he was only going to play guitar on the songs that Doug Clifford and Stu Cook did. And that's what happened. He did play, but he did not sing on any of them. There was, some people call this Fogerty's revenge. I completely discard that statement about this record because I don't think it was anybody's revenge. I just think it's a very strong record, and for Grail Marcus to say it was better than Pendulum, it's more likable than Pendulum. Well, Pendulum was more introspective with songs like It's Just a Thought. Was it Just a Thought? Born to Move is another one. But I had some great rockers on that one called Hate Tonight. And then, of course, you had the introspective Have You Ever Seen the Rain? That also went gold, Pendulum. And then had the hit singles Have You Ever Seen the Rain and Hate Tonight. This album yielded 2 singles, Sweet Hitchhiker, backed with Door to Door, and Someday Never Comes, backed with Tearing Up the Country. And I was able to talk to Doug Clifford about Tearing Up the Country, and it was basically an autobiographical song about how he started out loading big trucks, and he didn't want to go to school. He just wanted to be a musician, and he turned out to be one of the greatest drummers of all time for one of the best American rock and roll bands. And he has some great. He has all of his songs are great on here. You have "Need Someone to Hold," which was co-written with Stu Cook, the bass player. You have "What Are You Gonna Do," and let's see, "Need Someone to Hold," and "Tearing Up the Country." That was the B side of "Someday Never Comes." I do think that "Need Someone to Hold" is a great song. I've learned to play that on the guitar, and the lyrics are just so, true about when I've never had this happen, but when I go online, I'm not online, but when I play my music, when I played guitar and went on the and became a musician, I just would go to open mic nights. I'm not a professional musician, but Doug Clifford talks about the the highs and lows of being on the road on tour, but mostly the lows, and how lonely he could be on the road. And the lyrics are, "When I wake up this afternoon, another day to make it through. Might get lucky and find a dime. If things don't change, gonna give up trying. Give out the warm, comes back cold. Oh God, I need someone to hold." I mean, for a young guy that he was at the time, being on the road wasn't all it was cracked up to be. It was lonely, it was tiring, it was emotionally draining, and that's what I think comes out on the songs in this album. It just has feelings. It's very bare bones, and that's what I like about it. It's been said it's not Bayou Country, it's not Cosmo's Factory, which Doug Clifford had said to me when I was a freelance journalist, and I asked him about Tearing Up the Country. He was so gracious to talk to me about that song. Um, it's that song is just a great country song, and "What Are You Gonna Do" is about a lover who's talking to his girlfriend about you got to stand on your own. You got to be independent, and I'll help you to be independent. I'll help you to be strong. And it's just a very honest song. I mean, all these songs have so much honesty in them. But I mean, there are the rockers. You got "Sweet Hitchhiker," which was a big single from the album, and it really sounds like a classic Creedence album, especially with that guitar that sounds like the start of a Harley motorcycle. And lyrics are, "Sweet Hitchhiker, won't you ride on my fast machine?" So there's a little bit of sexual tension, a little bit of sexual innuendo on that song. But you also have "Looking for a Reason," which is the opening track on this album, and it's John Fogerty's introspective on. I thought it was just looking for a reason, just to stay, and maybe just as a relationship. But listening to it more, it was more of, should I stay with the band? What was the dream what was the daydream that took me into this whole thing? Why did I start out with these guys? Why did we start this band? If it's going to end like this, what was the point of starting it? But hindsight is 2020. I mean, the group started way back in 1960 as Tommy Fogerty and the Blue Velvets, and a lot of that early stuff can be found on the Creedence Clearwater Revival box set. Um, a lot of great tunes. And Tommy Fogerty was the lead singer at the time, and then John Fogerty took over. But they started as the Gollywogs in 1967, and their first single was "Call It Pretending" and "Porterville." Actually, "Porterville" and "Call It Pretending" was the B side. It was as the Gollywogs, but then they released it as Creedence Clearwater Revival, both on the Scorpio label. So I have that in the singles 45 the 45 singles box set that they released with some great picture sleeves and all. And that's a great collection, and that's going to be for another video. I've been listening to that lately and getting my thoughts together for that one. But good luck finding the original on the Scorpio label before they went to Fantasy Records, because it was as the Gollywogs and then it was as Creedence Clearwater Revival. And some of those 45s in there have picture sleeves that were not even in America. So that's another video for another time, and I hope you can join me for that. I'm going to decide when to do that one. But getting back to Mardi Gras, okay. I read a great review of this. It was, reprinted online from Greil Marcus, who wrote about this album in June of 1972 in the Cream magazine. And like I said before, he said that it was a likable album. He said it's not a great album, but there's greatness in it. But for me, I think it's both. I think it's a great album, and there is greatness to make it great. Now, take it like a friend, Stu Cook. He's just belting his heart out on it. Some people have been very critical of his voice, and I think he was trying to emulate the early Creedence stuff with the Creedence vocals that John Fogerty would always put his signature on. Uh, Need Someone to Hold, like I said, is a great ballad. Um, Tearing Up the Country, wonderful song. Someday Never Comes. Now, this is a song that could tear your heart out to pieces that John Fogerty wrote. Um, I think he was about 26 or 27 years old at the time when he wrote this song, maybe even younger. And it's about, you know, his father not being so great a father to him as a child. And then, the dominoes fell and he wasn't such a great father to his son. He wasn't even there when he was born, as far as I know. Oh, it's your favorite song on that album. Is that Someday Never Comes, Miko? Yeah, because you said that the last time when we did this album. We did this album together, Miko and I. When we did our album of the week, we did Mardi Gras. And I'm so glad that we did this because she was able to hear a different side of Creedence that most people, not most people, I can't say that because this album went gold in 1972, and in the top 200, it went to number 12. So it did get commercial success. A lot of people think that this didn't have any commercial success, that it just tanked, that it was a dumpster fire. Oh God, what I just said. But it went to number 12 and it went gold. It's never been listed anywhere else as going gold. Rolling Stone has called this the worst album ever by a rock and roll band. Well, I don't take much, you know, s- you know, crap out of Rolling Stone magazine. I don't think to me that they've been relevant for 36 years, maybe 35, 34 years, 34 years. The last really big Rolling Stone I read was like a thick book of the Beatles and their albums, and that wasn't 34 years ago. That was like in the past 10 years. But I think that the biggest magazine I ever had of them was when they had the top 500 songs of all time back in 1989, and that's how I wound up getting all of the albums that I some one of the ways I got some of the albums and the singles that I have. And but since then, with rock and roll music the way it was over the years, and who is it in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and why they're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's all a bunch of junk. I mean, music is subjective, opinions are subjective. Everybody has one, but like I said, I don't think that Rolling Stone is that relevant to me anymore as a periodical. But Someday Never Comes. Uh, Fogerty sings his heart out, and talks about that he wasn't even there. He needed to go away. He had to sort things out, and then now he passes that tradition. Not a tradition, but is it a curse to his son that he watches his son trying to be a man. He says someday he says to his son, someday you'll understand. Like his father said to Fogerty, you'll understand when you get older what it's like. And then he's telling his son, Fogerty, you'll know what it's like when you grow up. And he says, I'm here to tell you now, each and every mother's son, you better learn it fast and you better learn it young because someday never comes. And that's a song that hits hard with me. I love singing it, but when I first heard it, and I first heard this album, it brought tears to my eyes. Someday Never Comes. And it's probably one of the group's strongest efforts on a single. Maybe it should have went higher than it did, but it could have been in the top 5. Someday Never Comes. Sweet Hitchhiker, same thing. But there was so much turmoil surrounding this band. Is that one of the, like I was saying before about the history of this album, is that Doug Clifford and Stu Cook wanted to share the load, and they wanted to take some of the pressure off of John Fogerty's shoulders by wanting to do a couple of songs apiece. Because Fogerty was getting burned out. He wasn't getting any credit from Fantasy Records. He wasn't getting any money from Fantasy Records. The group wasn't getting any money from Fantasy Records because they signed their lives away when they signed to Fantasy. They were like, "Oh, we got a record contract. Oh, hey, let's go out and celebrate, have a couple of beers." They didn't read the fine print. I mean, name me a lot of groups that read the fine print in their contracts. and wound up millionaires. A lot of them didn't. A lot of them, Tommy James didn't even get his gold records because of the management at Roulette, at the Roulette label. That's a story for another time. But they didn't get anything. And the other members, and Tom, John's brother, Stu Cook, and Doug Clifford said, you're not getting any money from writing. Why are you still writing for them? He says, because we still have to be relevant. Once we're not on the charts, we're done. And he just kept on writing tunes and writing tunes. And then they thought he was burned out, that he just took control of everything, of all the hit singles. He sang on everything. He played lead guitar. He arranged the songs. He's playing saxophone on Long as I Can See the Light, which is the final track on Cosmos Factory. And it's a great flip side of Looking Out My Back Door, which is, Cosmos Factory is like, Doug Clifford told me that Cosmos Factory was like the Creedence's Sgt. Pepper's album. Well, that's another thing about comparing things to Sgt. Pepper's. I just think that Cosmos Factory was Cosmos Factory and Sgt. Pepper's was Sgt. Pepper's. And I think that the side two, you got What Are You Gonna Do, which is by Doug Clifford. I mentioned it before. It's about a lover telling his girl that, I want you to be strong and I want you to stand on your own and I want you to move in with me and I want you to share my life with me. Sail Away is a great ballad by Stu Cook. I mean, the way he sings it, he's got so much, heart in it. And it is great guitar playing by John Fogerty on it, great drums. I love the lyrics, spent a long time listening to the captain of the sea, shouting orders to his crew, no one hears but me. And that's probably introspective, that Fogerty was, making the rules in the group, and Stu was like, yeah, I'm with you. I'm fine. It's the bass player, you know, whatever we're doing, but he wants to make a clean break too. A lot of group members wrote a lot of different breakaway songs. Gene Cornish wrote a song called "Away Away" for the Rascals album "C," which is another great record. And he just wanted to break away from the group. Uh, that's what he told me in person. Is that I was just writing to get away and to do my own thing. And when we have a cover of the 1961 hit by Ricky Nelson, "Hello Mary Lou," almost done to the exact note by Creedence Clearwater Revival, almost to the exact original by Ricky Nelson, especially with the cowbell and the guitar and the vocals. The way the vocals were mixed for Ricky Nelson's version are practically mixed the same way on this version. "Door to Door" is a great rocker. Stu Cook does it again. He sings about being a salesman, and Grill Marcus, or was it Grill Marcus? I think he said that it was mostly about him being a salesman. He grew up being doing sales work in his early days, and it could be about the sexual tension between him and the housewives, and the lyrics are, this stuff will get the stand on if you use it loosely wadded. This here will get the paint out and won't mess your hair. Place your order early. I'm in a hurry. Neighbors at your doorway. Won't you sign right here? He didn't like it at all. He didn't like sales at all. He said, once I found out how I had to use certain tactics to get into people's doorways, he said he was done. He was done. And I've done sales, and I can tell you it's almost the same thing with me. I never liked working in sales, but that's a different story. But it's a great tune. It's a great rocker. But like I said, this is all very basic, and that's what's the charm of Creedence. Actually, on Facebook, I saw people listing Creedence's albums and going, "Oh yeah, Bayou Country, Willie and the Poor Boys, Green River, their debut, Cosmos Factory, Pendulum." And someone said, "How about Mardi Gras?" And they said, "No, that's like the worst thing that they ever did. I mean, that's not really a good album." And somebody chimed in and said, "It still has a charm." And it does have a charm to it. It does. It's one of the most underrated records in rock and roll. Creedence's Mardi Gras. And I play it a lot. Dare I say that it's my favorite Creedence album? Pendulum was like the album when I was listening to it. I love Pagan Baby on that album. The first track on Cosmos, I'm sorry, Pendulum, is Pagan Baby, and it's just what a great rock song that is. They're all playing at the top of their game, and it's just a thought. Uh, it was an introspective song on that. Wish I Could Hide Away was another one off of Pendulum. If you guys get a chance to listen to Pendulum, I'm sure you guys have heard Pendulum and have enjoyed it. That's one of my favorite albums. This is probably becoming my favorite album. I may get a little bit of flack for it, but hey, that's me. This is Pendulum Fantasy Records. Doug Clifford actually said he gave me his side of the story about that Fogerty wasn't going to do anything, or if that there was a tidbit that said that if Fogerty said to them, "If we don't do this album, I'm leaving," and there's two different sides to the story. And Doug Clifford told me his side, and I just went with, okay, I was being diplomatic, and I just listened because I couldn't comment either way because I liked the album, and I told Doug that I liked the album, and he said to me, "Well, I could tell you're being sincere about it." I said, "I am being sincere about it. I am being very sincere about it. I'm not the only one who thinks so. If you go on Amazon.com and you look under Creedence Clearwater Revival, it's mostly for the CD, but they did release all of their albums and half speed master them, including Mardi Gras. And I do have a German copy of this on 180 gram vinyl, and it does sound great as well. I wound up paying like whatever it was, $25 for it. It was well worth it because the sound is incredible on it, and it really brings out the instrumentation and the vocals. This one does too. I mean, it's really got great stereo separation on it. But the singles released from this album, Someday Never Comes, backed with Tearing Up the Country, and Sweet Hitchhiker, backed with Door to Door, were released in mono. They were still being released in mono, and that was 1971, 1972. So all of the original singles by Creedence from 1968 up to 1972 were all released in mono, in the original mono format, with the original mono mixes. They weren't fold downs from stereo mixes. They were basically always played on AM radio. I mean, they were even played on country stations, Creedence Clearwater Revival. You heard Bad Moon Rising and Proud Mary on country AM stations back then in 1969. So I think that they basically might have recorded them for mono. And when I told Doug Clifford that I have the singles collection and everything was recorded in mono, he was like, "Yeah, that was the way that that we originally did the songs." And the only single on that box set that's in stereo, I'm just giving you guys a quick sneak preview of it, is 45 Revolutions Per Minute. It was a double-sided part one and part two single of them just fooling around like they're on the radio, and there's this DJ talking to them about their careers and stuff like that. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It's funny, and it's actually, I believe, Doug Clifford being the DJ asking John, Tom, and Doug about the careers and what would you do now and all that kind of stuff. But that's a very rare single to get, and that was included in the CD box set and as well as the vinyl box set. But everything, that was the only stereo mix. Even when they reissued I Heard It Through a Grapevine, backed with Good Golly Miss Molly in 1976, those tracks were in mono. So, and I think that they were real mono mixes. I don't think that they were folded down from the stereos. A caveat here is that the I Heard It Through a Grapevine 45 version is much, much shorter than the 11-minute plus version on Cosmos Factory, which runs about 11:07. But I think that that's got to be the ultimate version. But Mardi Gras is a very strong album, and actually, I have the European tour, the double album that they did in 1971, Creedence Clearwater Revival in Europe. In 1971, and they did do Door to Door on that album. They did do it live. They did Hey Tonight. They did Keep On Chooglin' in a medley with Pagan Baby, and that's a great live album. A lot of people talk about Live at Leeds by The Who. I'm sure it's a great record. Yes, I've yet to listen to it, so give me some time and bear with me. But Live in Europe 1971 by Creedence is a great double live album. The songs they do on it are terrific. And I think that if you're a Creedence fan, if you're a rock and roll fan, I think you would love that album. Same with this. I think if you're just a music fan and you want to hear something different, you may know the singles that are already on this album. If you do, you probably found them on the Creedence Chronicles CD or album. That's the 20 greatest hits, the 20 hits that they had, which is almost like the ultimate Creedence collection to have. I started off with that. That's how I started with Creedence. I bought it offline. I'm sorry, I bought it from the CD Club, the Columbia CD Club. That was one of the CDs I got. It was a Columbia Record Club issue of it. And there's a lot of sentimental moments to that compilation because my dad was we were just hanging out and we had the CD on, and it was amazing at how he knew most of the songs on the collection, and neither he nor my mom even owned a Creedence record. They didn't own a Creedence album. They didn't own a Creedence 45. My parents listened to a lot of the radio. They didn't have a lot of records in their collection. That's what they left me to do to fill my entire apartment uh, everywhere you look with records. But they passed that on to me. So I got the music from my parents. But it was amazing how my dad knew. Have you ever seen the rain? Looking out my back door. Well, those are songs everybody knows. Born on the Bayou. And he was singing like all the lyrics, and I said, "Wow!" I said, "You know these songs?" I listened to the radio a lot. He said, "I used to listen to your hits of the week." He says, "And then I used to go out for the night." So radio was a big thing. That's how music was accessible to everyone. In the early days. But this album definitely. I also have a promo copy of this album. It has like the sticker on the front which says. Uh, Demonstration record, not for sale, suggested cuts for airplay, and it lists all of the songs. It's a big sticker that takes up the bottom of it, so it cuts off actually the bottom of the LP cover like this. And it is the brown label, but it does say promotion, not for sale. It has the brown with the F in it, which I believe is probably most of the copies that you find this on. You don't find an early copy on the blue label. I'll tell you a story about this. Is I went to Princeton Record Exchange in New Jersey, circa 1995, 1996, and I knew about this album. I knew about it, but I had never seen it. I knew about it from the Creedence Chronicle collection, knowing that the final album, the Swan Song, was Mardi Gras, released in 1972. It didn't mention about it going gold like it did the previous albums. But I went down there and I was just looking for what was I looking for? I was collecting the Rascals at the time, the Young Rascals, and the Beach Boys and other groups that I hadn't yet to have in my collection. And I saw this record and I saw this cover. And then I looked at the back and I saw that the three of them, there was only three of them left. And I did take the record out, and it was the blue label with the fantasy, and it said full radial stereo at the bottom, like all of their albums did on fantasy in the United States. I'm sure in England it might have been the same way, or overseas, but all of them had the full radial stereo, and this had full radial stereo on it. And I don't remember seeing a barcode on the back. If it was a barcode, then it's a reissue, like from the 80s. And excuse me. I was not in the market to buy that record at that point. I knew the singles, but I didn't have an interest in buying the album at the time, so I just left it there. And what could I say? I bought it over the years, and I've loved it. I've loved it to this day. Uh, I love the songs. I just think it's a unique, and that's a good thing. It's a unique collection of songs. That's what I have to say. And 10 songs on this album. Is it 10 songs too little? Maybe. It does leave you wanting more, but I think the way it was presented is okay. But I think that, every time I listen to this, I hear something different. I hear it's fresh every time I listen to it. And I love it. I love it. I also have the 20-bit K remastered CD, and it's that also sounds excellent. I mean, that is a great CD. No bonus tracks, but it was the 20K remaster that Fantasy reissued it with. I also have the one that was released just the original Fantasy one, which the sound quality was good for the time, but they didn't take any time remastering it like they did with the previous albums or putting it on 24 karat gold CD. Why, I don't know, because the album did go gold. I mean, let's be fair about it. Um, but I do think that this needs more love. I do, and I'm really happy with Greil Marcus with what he said about it. He gives it an A minus. He said that maybe Stu Cook's songs were a little bit forced, but I don't think so. I think that he was trying to just find himself as a bassist, but as a singer. And he would sing, probably they would sing backup vocals, but John and Stu and Doug. But you know, as a group, I mean, they were a group when Fogerty Tommy was with them, and they were, originally four members. I mean, they were a group. I mean, people come out and say John Fogerty was Creedence Clearwater Revival because he wrote all the songs and he arranged them and he was in control a lot. But there were four guys in this group to make this group work. Okay, and Fantasy Records knew what they had. Unfortunately, we all know, you probably might know about Saul's Ants, who was involved with Fantasy Records and how they didn't get their due money wise, but they gave us so much great music. And you can find an album out there which is not that hard to find. It's called The Gollywogs, and it's called Pre-Credence. So it was before Credence became Credence. It had songs like Fight Fire, Porterville, Call It Pretending, which they wound up doing on their debut album in 1968. And there was a song called Brown Eyed Girl that they did, not to be confused with Van Morrison's Brown Eyed Girl. It's a completely different song. It's very raunchy, it's very bluesy, and that's what they did as the Gollywogs. You can even find that stuff on a compilation called Nuggets, which is a compilation of really far out psychedelic music by different bands that, I believe there may be, well, there's a Genesis. There was a group called The Gods, and they did an album called Genesis, and they were psychedelic, but they were like not not recognized very much, and that's the stuff that's on Nuggets. It's those psychedelic freakouts like Strawberry Alarm Clock, I believe, is on there. Um, there's so many others, but you'll find Fight Fire, Brown Eyed Girl. You won't find the Call Pretending or Porterville because that was released as a single, and that was also on Credence's first album. And I think Credence's first album, just the self-titled Credence album with Susie Q on it. I have the one without the blurb that says include Susie Q. I have the first pressing, an early pressing of that. First pressings didn't say include Susie Q, even though Susie Q was on the album. The full Susie Q, the 8.5 minutes. It's interesting that it's actually cut up in two parts, as a single, side one and part one and part two, Susie Q. But I do think that the first Credence album, the self-titled, should have been released in mono because those songs I think belong in mono. You have them doing "I Put a Spell on You." You have them doing Susie Q. You have them doing "Walk on Water," uh, "Walking on the Water," and they're very raw and raunchy songs. And it should have been a mono album to me, the first album. Um, but one of the songs that sounds like kind of almost nodding to Proud Mary, I would say, is "Sail Away" because it's got that it's got that straight rhythm. Sweet Hitchhiker it's like that. It's like classic Credence. So I ask you now, while I'm here, and what do you think of this record as a whole? Do you like just some of the cuts? Do you think that it warrants the panning that it got, or do you think that it has its merits and it should get more love than it does? I think it should get more love than it does, and it's got much more love. Like I said before, on Amazon.com, there were reviews that were 4 stars out of 5, 4.5 stars out of 5. Hi, Miko. Yep, the album was really good. Yep, it certainly was. It was really good, and I know you enjoyed it. And thank you for doing it with me. Uh, People were giving it 4 stars out of 5, 5 stars out of 5. And some people, of course, gave it 2.5 out of 5 because I think that that's what came down through the years. Because once you have a few people up in the rock and roll, the know-it-alls that come out and say this is the worst album of all time, don't even waste your time. And it came down. It was a domino effect. Like, oh, I don't like it. Oh, this is terrible. And blah blah blah. And I'm like, give it a listen. Give it a real honest to goodness listen from front to back, back to front, and tell me what you think. Because this is probably now my favorite Creedence Clearwater Revival album. I mean, I love the cover, and the back cover is great. It looks like that they're all in a good mood, just chatting with each other. But they did do a few concerts live. They did do a Mardi Gras tour, but then after that, due to like financial uh, difficulties and the like, the group disbanded after that. And John Fogerty went on to do the Blue Ridge Rangers, which was only him. It was him playing all the instruments, him singing all the songs. And on the album cover, it's funny because you see 5 different shots of him with all different instruments in his hand. And, you couldn't really see who it was. And on the back, you see him from behind playing his guitar while sitting in a boat. So you don't know it's him. And only until you listen to the album, it's John Fogerty. But it's only John Fogerty. And, the Blue Ridge Rangers was just him. And he even said that was an ego trip, that entire album. I don't think that was an ego trip. I really think that was a good album. It was all covers, like You're the Reason. And what else was there? I Ain't Never is another one, but that's a good album. And he went in 1973 and did that. And Tommy Fogerty went to do a Goodbye Media Man. And that was I think it was his first single when he left Creedence. But I really love Mardi Gras, and I really would like to know what my listeners out there, my fans out there on my YouTube channel would really think about this record. This is going to be repeated. That you could see this in a rerun, and then maybe you could add some comments yourself. So for those who didn't see me tonight live, and Miko, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you joined my live, my 40-minute chat, and I'm glad that it worked this time around. I mean, hey, technology, I'm getting there. Thank you, Miko. Well, great job. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your support and your very wonderful, dear friendship, and sharing my music and my time with you. And thank you for being such a wonderful, dear friend. And this is Mardi Gras, Creedence Clearwater Revival. This is Nick, the record lover, signing off. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it. Good night.